Hello guys, it's Alyssa of Pile of Fabric. Today I'll be sharing how to make the foundation paper pieced triangle wheel block. I posted this video a few years ago, but I had many people request that I slow it down and give a little bit more detail on exactly what I was doing. So today I've updated the video for you. I've slowed it down and hopefully this will give you more information on actually how to make the block and you can follow along. The templates for this block can be downloaded at my blog, where you can also find step-by-step diagrams and written instructions for the block. I will also include a link for this in the description. Supplies used: an Elmer's washable glue with a fine tip, Elmer's washable glue in the glue stick form, a 1.5 inch by 12 inch at a quarter ruler, a straight edge cardstock or a flat ruler, Schmetz Sharp Microtex needles for piecing, the triangle wheel templates printed on 8.5 by 11 inch wash away stabilizer sheets. These stabilizer sheets can be left in your project and will wash away, which means no wasting time picking off papers, which is one of my least favorite parts about foundation paper piecing. Cutting the fabric. I have already starched and pressed all of my fabric to prepare for cutting. Starching your fabric before cutting will help stabilize the bias edges of the fabric, and it will also give you greater accuracy when piecing. So when you press a seam open, it actually stays open and doesn't want to keep flapping to the side. So starch is really important, and it's gonna really help you get better at foundation paper piecing and have kind of less of a headache when you're foundation paper piecing. In order to make one 12-inch finished size triangle wheel block using foundation paper piecing, you're going to need the following pieces of fabric cut out. You'll need 6 4-inch by 6-inch pieces of fabric for the center triangle pieces A and B. You'll need 1 7-inch by 11-inch piece of fabric for the background piece C. 1 12.5-inch by 3-inch piece of fabric for the background piece D, and 1 8.5-inch by 13-inch piece of fabric for background piece E. Sewing machines used. For this project, I used only one of my machines, the Juki TL2010Q single stitch sewing machine, and it's inside of a Sew Easy table. Alright, let's begin. I printed the templates onto the wash away stabilizer sheets. I cut each template out roughly about 1/8 of an inch outside of the outer black line. I'm not cutting directly on the lines yet. I tape any pieces together that didn't fit on one stabilizer sheet. I decide which of my 4-inch by 6-inch pieces of fabric I want to position where for the triangle in the center, and then I set them aside. I lay out my background fabric wrong side up, position templates C, D, and E, and cut the fabric around the templates. Again, I'm cutting roughly around the templates, not directly on the solid black lines. I place a few dots of washable school glue on the back side of template D and stick the template to the wrong side of the fabric. Then I heat set the glue with a hot dry iron. I repeat this for templates C and E as well. I stick the wrong side of fabric A1 to the back side of section A1. So wrong sides together, the wrong side of the template to the wrong side of the fabric. Make sure that your fabric is covering section A1 entirely. I place a dot of washable school glue on the back side of section A1. Then I heat set the glue with a hot dry iron. I line up a flat ruler with the line between section A1 and A2, and I fold template back against the ruler. Then I grab my add a quarter ruler and trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch. I line fabric A2 with the cut edge of fabric A1, right sides together. I make sure fabric A2 covers section A2 on the template entirely by holding the fabric in place and flipping it over. I make sure to backstitch and I sew from edge to edge across the entire template on the line between section A1 and A2. I set the seam, then press fabric A2 outward. I line up a flat ruler with the line between sections A2 and A3. I fold the template back against the ruler. I use an add a quarter ruler and trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch. I line fabric A3 up with the cut edge of fabric A2, right sides together. I make sure again that fabric A3 covers the section for A3 on the template. I sew directly on the line between section A2 and A3 on the template. I set the seam and press fabric A3 outward. I carefully cut along the outer black line of the entire template. Now I'm going to repeat these same steps of piecing for the second half of the center triangle, for pieces B1, B2, and B3. I take a pin and I place it through the upper points of section A1 and B1 to perfectly match the two pieces. I keep the pin pushed into my pressing board and place a thin line of glue along the edge. I line up the two edges of the pieces and heat set the glue with a hot dry iron. With a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I sew along the entire edge. I pop open the center seam with my fingers and press the seam open and flat. I carefully cut away the dog ears from the top of the triangle. Using a ruler and rotary cutter, I trim along the outer black line around each of the background pieces C, D, and E. I take a pin and I place it through the lower left point of piece C and the lower left point of the center triangle to perfectly match the two pieces. I keep the pin pushed into my pressing board and place a thin line of glue along the edge. I line up the edges of the pieces and heat set the glue with a hot, dry iron. With a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I sew along the entire edge of template C. I press the seam toward template C. I take a pin and I place it through the upper left point of piece D and lower right point of the center triangle to perfectly match the two pieces. I keep the pin pushed into my pressing board and place a thin line of glue along the edge. I line up the edges of the pieces and heat set the glue with a hot, dry iron. With a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I sew along the entire edge of template D. I press the seam toward template D. I take a pin and I place it through the upper right point of template E and the upper left point of template D to perfectly match the two pieces. I keep the pin pushed into my pressing board and place a thin line of glue along the edge. I line up the edges of the pieces and heat set the glue with a hot, dry iron. With a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I sew along the entire edge of template E. I press the seam toward template E. I now have a block that measures 12.5 inches square. When sewn into a finished product, it'll be 12 inches square. You can turn this single block into something cool like the side of a bag, as shown here, or you can download the free quilt pattern on my blog. The pattern includes instructions for making a crib, throw, twin, queen, or king size of this triangle wheel quilt, and I'll make sure to include a link in the description. Thank you so much for your feedback on the first version of the video. I hope this new version was a little easier to follow. If you liked this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more sewing tutorials.